The courtroom was so silent you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Richard Vance sat with a smirk that didn't quite touch his eyes, adjusting his silk tie, confident that his expensive legal team had just buried his wife, Eleanor. Everyone in the gallery, the press, the neighbors, even Eleanor's own lawyer, looked defeated. Richard had painted her as unstable, reckless, and unfit. It was over. The gavel was about to fall. But then Judge Anthony Hargrave leaned forward, peering over his spectacles, not at the lawyers, but directly at Richard. He cleared his throat and said, "Mr. Vance, before I rule, I have one final question." That single question didn't just change the verdict. It unraveled a lie, 3 years in the making. To the outside world, Eleanor and Richard Vance were the epitome of the American dream. Richard was the CEO of Vantage Systems, a cybersecurity firm based in downtown Seattle that had just gone public, turning him into a multi-millionaire overnight. Eleanor was the stunning, supportive wife who chaired charity galas for the Children's Hospital and kept their sprawling estate in the exclusive neighborhood of Medina running like a Swiss watch. They had been married for 12 years. They had a beautiful 8-year-old daughter named Lily, a golden retriever named Buster, and a summer home in the Hamptons. On Instagram, their life was filtered to perfection, sunsets on yachts, black-tied dinners, and candid laughter. But the reality inside the Vance household was a cold, silent war. The trouble didn't start with shouting matches or thrown vases. It started with silence. Over the last 2 years, Richard had become a ghost in his own home. He would return from the office at 10:00 p.m., smelling of scotch and expensive cologne that Eleanor didn't recognize, and head straight to his study. He locked the door, something he had never done before. Eleanor tried to be the understanding wife. She told herself the IPO was stressful. She told herself that men like Richard carried the weight of the world on their shoulders. But the dynamic shifted aggressively on a rainy Tuesday in November. Eleanor was in the kitchen organizing the catering for an upcoming fundraiser when Richard stormed in. He wasn't just tired, he was furious. "Who touched my laptop?" he barked, his face flushed. Eleanor looked up, startled. "No one, Richard. I dusted the study, but I didn't move anything." "You were in there." He closed the distance between them, looming over her. "I told you, Eleanor. My office is off limits. There are confidential client files in there. If you compromise my security, you compromise this entire family." "I was just dusting," she whispered, her heart hammering. "You're clumsy," he sneered. "You're forgetful. Remember last week you left the garage door open all night? Anyone could have walked in." Eleanor frowned. I didn't think I did. I remember hitting the button." "You didn't," Richard said with absolute conviction. "I had to close it at 3:00 a.m. You're losing it, Elle. You need to see a doctor." This was the beginning. It wasn't a physical blow, but a psychological one. Over the next 6 months, strange things began to happen around the house. Keys would go missing only to reappear in Eleanor's purse. Important documents for Lily's school would vanish, and Richard would find them in the trash can, accusing Eleanor of throwing them away. The thermostat would be set to 90 degrees in the middle of the night, waking them up in a sweat, and the logs would show it was changed from Eleanor's phone app. Eleanor began to doubt her own sanity. She visited a therapist, Dr. Aris, whom Richard had recommended. She didn't know at the time that Dr. Aris was an old college friend of Richard's from his days at Yale. Every session seemed to focus not on her anxiety, but on her memory lapses and erratic behavior. By the time the divorce papers were served, Eleanor wasn't just heartbroken. She was a woman who believed she was broken. Richard didn't just want a divorce. He wanted everything. He wanted full custody of Lily, claiming Eleanor was mentally unstable and a danger to the child. He wanted the house. He wanted to leave her with nothing but a small stipend, citing a prenup she barely remembered signing a decade ago. The night he handed her the papers, he didn't even look at her. He stood by the window swirling a glass of whiskey. "It's for your own good, Elle," he said smoothly. "You need help. Institutional help. I can't let Lily be raised by someone who can't even remember to turn off the stove." Eleanor looked at the man she had loved for 12 years. "I never left the stove on, Richard." "See." He sighed, looking at her with mock pity. "You don't even remember doing it. This is why I have to win." The divorce proceedings were brutal from day one. Richard hired Marcus Sterling, a lawyer, known in Seattle as the Viper. Sterling cost $1,000 an hour and had never lost a high-profile custody case. Eleanor, with her frozen bank accounts and limited access to cash, had to settle for a court-appointed referral who eventually passed her off to Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was young Messi and operated out of a small office above a bakery in the University District. She had coffee stains on her files and looked perpetually exhausted. When Eleanor first met her, she felt a sinking feeling in her gut. How could this woman stand up to Marcus Sterling? "Okay, Mrs. Vance," Sarah said, pushing her glasses up her nose. "Here's the reality. Your husband is painting a narrative. He has logs of you missing appointments. He has affidavits from your housekeeper saying you seem disoriented. He even has a report from a private investigator showing you sitting in your car in a parking lot for 3 hours, staring at nothing." "I was crying," Eleanor said, her voice trembling. "I was crying because my husband told me he didn't love me anymore." "The court doesn't see tears," Sarah said gently but firmly. "They see instability. We need proof, Eleanor. Hard proof. Did he have an affair?" I suspect it," Eleanor admitted. "His secretary, Jessica Thorne. She's 24. She's been with the company for a year. He bought her a bracelet, a Cartier bangle. I found the receipt in his jacket pocket, but when I confronted him, he said it was for a client gift. The next day, the receipt was gone." "Classic," Sarah muttered, scribbling notes. "Gaslighting 101. But suspicion isn't evidence. We need to find the money. Men like Richard Vance don't leave their wives for a secretary unless they've already secured the bag. If he's hiding assets, we can prove he's lying to the court. If he's lying about money, the judge might believe he's lying about you." While Sarah went to work on the financials, Richard escalated his attacks. He knew Eleanor was staying in the guest room of the estate until the court hearing. He used this proximity to torment her. One evening, Eleanor came home to find the house filled with people. It was a dinner party. Richard was at the head of the table laughing with business associates. Jessica Thorne was there, sitting at Richard's right hand, wearing a stunning red dress, and Eleanor's breath hitched the Cartier bangle. "Oh, Eleanor," Richard said loudly, the room falling silent. "I forgot to tell you we were hosting tonight. Did it slip your mind again?" The guests looked at Eleanor with pity. She was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, her hair in a messy bun, holding a bag of takeout. She looked like the crazy ex-wife crashing a sophisticated gathering. You didn't tell me," Eleanor stammered. "I sent you a calendar invite 3 days ago," Richard said, holding up his phone. "Look," he showed the screen to the guest nearest him. "Sent Tuesday, 9:00 a.m. Eleanor felt the walls closing in. She fled up the stairs, humiliation burning her cheeks. In her room, she checked her phone. There was no invite. But when she refreshed her calendar, suddenly, there it was. Dinner party, 7 p.m. He had added it remotely just now. She sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. He was using his tech skills, his company's software, to manipulate her digital life. But who would believe her? He was the tech genius. She was the confused housewife. 2 days later, the situation turned dangerous. It was Eleanor's weekend with Lily. They were at the local park. Lily was playing on the swings, and Eleanor was sitting on a bench watching her, feeling a moment of peace. She looked down at her phone to answer a text from Sarah. When she looked up, the swing was empty. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced her chest. "Lily!" She stood up, spinning around. "Lily!" The park was crowded. Kids were everywhere, but no Lily. Eleanor began to scream. She ran toward the parking lot, her vision blurring. Has anyone seen a little girl, blonde hair, pink jacket? 10 minutes of pure hell passed. Eleanor was on her knees, hyperventilating, about to call the police, when Richard's sleek black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. The back window rolled down. Lily was sitting there, eating an ice cream cone. Richard stepped out of the driver's seat, looking calm and disappointed. He held up his phone, which was recording. "This is what happens," Richard said to the camera narration style. "I tracked my daughter's GPS watch. She wandered 3 blocks away to a convenience store while her mother was on her phone. I had to leave a meeting to come pick her up." "I was watching her!" Eleanor screamed, rushing the car. "She was on the swing a second ago." "You lost her, Eleanor," Richard said, coldly stopping the recording. "And now the judge is going to see this video. You're unfit." Eleanor looked at Lily. "Baby, why did you run away?" Lily looked down at her shoes. She looked frightened. "Daddy told me to," she whispered, barely audible. "What?" Eleanor gasped. "Daddy texted my watch," Lily said. "He said if I ran to the store, I'd get a prize. He said it was a game of hide and seek with Mummy." Eleanor stared at Richard. A monster. He had used their child as a pawn in a staged disappearance, just to get footage of Eleanor panicking. "She's lying," Richard said smoothly, ushering Lily back into the car. "She's confused, just like her mother. I'll see you in court, Eleanor." As the car drove away, Eleanor didn't cry. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. He had crossed the line. He wasn't just hurting her anymore. He was weaponizing Lily. She dialed Sarah. "He staged it," Eleanor said, her voice flat. "He hacked her watch or texted her. We need to get that watch." "Eleanor," Sarah warned. "If you steal evidence, we lose." "I won't steal it," Eleanor said. "But I'm done playing the victim. Richard Vantance thinks he's the smartest man in the room. I need you to find someone smarter." Sarah paused. "I know a guy. He's an ex-forensic accountant for the FBI. He was fired for creative methods, but he hates guys like Richard." "Hire him," Eleanor said. "I'll sell my jewelry. I'll sell my car. Whatever it costs. I want to burn Richard's kingdom to the ground." Sarah Jenkins' guy was not what Eleanor expected. She pictured a suit-clad accountant or a stereotypical private eye in a trench coat. Instead, she met Caleb Wright in the back booth of a 24-hour diner in Seattle's industrial district. Caleb wore a faded hoodie, had ink-stained fingers, and looked like he hadn't slept in a week. A laptop covered in stickers sat open in front of him, scrolling through lines of code that looked like gibberish to Eleanor. "This is Mrs. Vance," Sarah said, sliding into the booth. "Eleanor, meet Caleb. He used to hunt money launderers for the feds, before he realized the bureaucracy was protecting the biggest criminals. Caleb didn't look up from his screen. Richard Vance, CEO of Vantage Systems, net worth estimated at $40 million but likely double that in hidden assets. Likes single malt Scotch drives a Maybach and apparently enjoys torturing his wife via smart home automation. Did I miss anything? Eleanor blinked, taken aback. How do you know about the smart home stuff? Caleb finally looked up. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and surprisingly kind. Because I looked at your house's data traffic, Mrs. Vance. Your router is sending out packets like a beacon. Someone has root access to your entire life. Thermostat locks cameras, even your car's GPS. He's not just logging in. He has a script running. It's automated psychological warfare. Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. Can you stop it? I can block him, Caleb said, taking a sip of black coffee. But if I lock him out, he'll know we're on to him. And right now, we need him to feel safe. We need him arrogant. We need the money, Caleb, Sarah interjected. We need to prove he's hiding assets to leverage a settlement or destroy his credibility in family court. Caleb turned his laptop around. On the screen was a complex web of lines and circles. Richard is smart. He's not stuffing cash under a mattress. He's using shell companies. I've traced a recurring payment from Vantage Systems to a consulting firm in Delaware called Blue Horizon LLC. Blue Horizon has no employees, no website, and no office, just a P.O. box. And from there, Eleanor asked, leaning in. From there, the money moves to the Cayman Islands, Caleb explained, into an account held by a trust. The beneficiary of the trust is anonymous, but here's the kicker. The signatory for Blue Horizon isn't Richard, it's a J. Thorne. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Jessica Thorne, his secretary. The mistress, Sarah corrected, her eyes narrowing. He's using her to funnel the money. If we can prove Jessica is signing these checks under Richard's direction, we get them for fraud embezzlement, and we blow the custody case wide open. But there's a problem, Caleb said, his voice dropping lower. The Cayman banks are fortresses. I can see the money going in, but I can't see the account details without a subpoena, and no judge will grant a subpoena based on my illegal hacking. We need physical proof, a ledger, a password, a physical token, something Richard keeps close. Eleanor thought back to the cold nights in the house, Richard's obsession with his study. He has a safe, she said suddenly, in his study, hidden behind the built-in bookshelves. He thinks I don't know it's there, but I saw him opening it once when he thought I was asleep. A safe is good, Caleb nodded, but unless you know the combination... I don't, Eleanor admitted. But he's arrogant. He told me once that the most secure passwords are the ones right in front of your face. He prides himself on memory. Caleb typed furiously. I can try to crack his digital patterns, but if there's a physical ledger in that safe that's the smoking gun... Mrs. Vance, do you still have access to the house? Technically, yes, Eleanor said. The court order says I can enter to retrieve personal belongings until the final decree, as long as I give 24 hours notice. No, Caleb shook his head. If you give notice, he scrubs the place. You need to get in when he's not expecting it. That's breaking and entering, Sarah warned. If she gets caught, she loses Lily forever. Eleanor looked at the table. She thought of Lily's scared face in the car. She thought of the game Richard had played with their daughter. The law wasn't protecting her. It was being used as a weapon against her. I'll do it, Eleanor said, her voice steady. Next Tuesday. Richard has a board meeting in San Francisco. He'll be gone overnight. The house will be empty." "It won't be empty," Caleb warned. "The cameras will be on. The alarms will be set." "You said you could control the house." Eleanor looked at him. "Can you loop the cameras?" Caleb smirked, a glint of excitement in his eyes. "I can make the cameras show an empty hallway for as long as you need. I can kill the alarm. But I can't open the safe. That's on you." The plan was set. It was a heist, pure and simple. A desperate housewife, a disbarred accountant, and a messy lawyer against a tech mogul. It was madness. But it was Eleanor's only shot. The day of the hearing arrived with a grey, suffocating drizzle typical of Seattle. The King County Courthouse loomed like a stone giant, indifferent to the lives being torn apart inside. Eleanor wore a navy blue suit Sarah had picked out from a thrift store, modest, serious, but not expensive. She wanted to look like a responsible mother, not the gold digger Richard was painting her to be. Inside courtroom 4B, the atmosphere was heavy. Richard sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by Marcus Sterling and 2 junior associates. Richard looked impeccable in a charcoal custom suit, projecting an air of sad resignation. He nodded politely to Eleanor as she entered a gesture that made her stomach turn. Presiding was Judge Anthony Hargrave. He was an older man, known for being stern, meticulous, and suffering no fools. He had a reputation for favoring stability in custody cases, which usually meant siding with the parent who had the money and the house. Marcus Sterling stood up for his opening statement. He didn't shout. His voice was a smooth, poisonous baritone. "Your Honor." Sterling began pacing slowly before the bench. "This is not a case about money. It is not a case about infidelity. It is a case about safety. The safety of a minor child, Lily Vance. We will present irrefutable evidence that Mrs. Vance has suffered a severe psychological decline over the last 2 years. We will show that she is neglectful, paranoid, and prone to hallucinations. We do not do this with malice, but with a heavy heart. Mr. Vance simply wants to protect his daughter." Sarah Jenkins stood up next. She looked nervous, shuffling her papers. "Your Honor, we intend to prove that this decline is a fabrication, a result of systematic gaslighting and emotional abuse designed to strip a mother of her rights." Judge Hargrave looked over his glasses at Sarah. "Gaslighting is a buzzword, Ms. Jenkins. I prefer evidence." "We will provide it, Your Honor," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. The morning session was a bloodbath. Sterling called the housekeeper, Maria. Maria refused to look at Eleanor. Under Sterling's questioning, she claimed that Eleanor often forgot to feed Lily, left doors unlocked, and spent days in bed staring at the wall. Eleanor wanted to scream. She had paid for Maria's daughter's dental surgery last year. Richard must have paid her double to lie. Then came Dr. Aris. The psychiatrist walked to the stand with confident strides. He swore to tell the truth. "Dr. Aris," Sterling asked, "in your professional opinion, does Eleanor Vance suffer from a personality disorder?" "I believe she exhibits signs of borderline personality disorder with dissociative episodes," Dr. Aris lied smoothly. "During our sessions, she often couldn't recall events that had just happened. She expressed violent fantasies about her husband. I recommended medication, which she refused to take." "Objection," Sarah shouted. "Doctor-patient privilege. Waived regarding custody evaluations where the child's safety is at risk." Judge Hargrave ruled instantly. "Overruled. Continue." Eleanor felt tears pricking her eyes. Violating fantasies. She had vented about Richard being controlling, yes, but violent, never. They were twisting her pain into a weapon. But the final nail in the coffin came after the lunch recess. "Your Honor," Sterling said, "I would like to submit Exhibit G into evidence. Video footage taken 5 days ago at Green Lake Park." Sarah froze. They hadn't expected them to use it this early. A large monitor was wheeled out. The video played. It showed the chaotic scene perfectly framed. Eleanor running through the park, screaming like a banshee. Eleanor attacking Richard's car. Eleanor looking wild-eyed and hysterical, while Richard remained calm. The audio was crisp. "You lost her." "Eleanor." Richard's voice on the recording sounded reasonable, concerned. Eleanor's screams sounded unhinged. The courtroom was silent as the video ended. The press in the back row was scribbling furiously. Even the bailiff looked at Eleanor with suspicion. "She lost her child in a public park," Sterling said, letting the silence hang. "She was distracted by her phone, and when the father who had to track the child via GPS arrived, she assaulted him. This is not a safe environment for an 8-year-old girl." Judge Hargrave watched the video twice. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked at Eleanor. The look wasn't angry. It was pitying. And that was worse. "Ms. Jenkins," the judge said, "do you have a defense for this incident?" "Your Honor." Sarah stood up. "Mrs. Vance contends that the child was instructed to hide by the father via text message to her smart watch." "Is there proof of this text?" the judge asked. We do not have the watch, Your Honor. Mr. Vance took possession of it immediately after the incident." Sterling chuckled softly. "Convenient. So the defense is a conspiracy theory that a father told his daughter to run away into traffic." "He knew she wouldn't go into traffic," Eleanor blurted out, standing up. "He knew she would go to the store. It was a setup." "Sit down, Mrs. Vance," Judge Hargrave snapped. "Another outburst like that, and I will hold you in contempt." Eleanor sank back into her chair. Richard turned to look at her. He didn't smile. He just mouthed one word: checkmate. The day ended with the defense in tatters. Sarah packed her briefcase in silence. "It's bad," Sarah whispered as they walked out into the rain. "Sterling is destroying us. If we don't find something solid tonight, the judge is going to rule tomorrow morning. He's already made up his mind, Eleanor. I can see it." Eleanor looked at the grey sky. She felt hollowed out. The legal system required facts, and Richard owned the facts because he owned the data. "Tonight," Eleanor said, her voice hard as steel. "We do it tonight." "Eleanor, are you sure?" Sarah asked. "If you get caught." "I'm already losing her, Sarah," Eleanor said, opening her umbrella. "I have nothing left to lose. Tell Caleb to get the system ready. I'm going home." The rain in Seattle didn't just fall, it smothered. At 2:00 a.m., the exclusive neighborhood of Medina was a ghost town of manicured hedges and slumbering security systems. Eleanor sat in the driver's seat of Caleb's battered sedan, parked 3 streets away from her former home. She adjusted the earpiece Caleb had given her. "Sound check." Caleb's voice buzzed in her ear, clear but tense. "You reading me, Mrs. Vance?" "I hear you," Eleanor whispered. Her hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard, her knuckles were white. She was wearing black running gear and a beanie. She felt ridiculous, like a character in a bad movie, but the adrenaline pumping through her veins was very real. "Okay," Caleb said. "I've tapped into the local node. I'm seeing the house's heartbeat. Richard's system is a custom-built military-grade encryption on the perimeter, but he got lazy with the internal motion sensors. He routed them through a third-party server to save bandwidth. That's my back door." "Is he there?" Eleanor asked, Thermal imaging is inconclusive, Caleb admitted. The master bedroom is cold. The heating is set to away mode. He should be in San Francisco. But the server room, his study, is running hot. That's normal for the equipment he keeps in there. You have a 10-minute window before the system does a handshake with the security company. If you're inside when that happens, I can't mask you. 10 minutes, Eleanor breathed. Okay. She exited the car and moved through the shadows. She knew every inch of this property. She had planted the hydrangeas along the fence. She had chosen the gravel for the driveway. Now she had to cross it like an intruder. She reached the side door, the one leading to the mudroom. Keypad, she whispered. Cycle is... now, Caleb said. Enter 9922. You have 3 seconds. Eleanor punched the code. The light turned green. She slipped inside. The house smelled the same, a mix of lemon verbena cleaning polish and the faint, lingering scent of oak. But it felt wrong. It felt sterile. The photos of her and Lily that used to line the hallway were gone, replaced by abstract modern art that Richard favored. It was as if she had been erased. I'm in, she whispered. Move, Caleb commanded. Study is on the 2nd floor, north corner. Watch the stairs. The 3rd step squeaks. I know, Eleanor thought. I'm the one who asked him to fix it for 6 years. She crept up the stairs, avoiding the loose board. The house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the pounding of her own heart. She reached the study door. It was locked. Digital lock, Caleb said. I'm brute forcing it. Got it. The lock clicked. Eleanor pushed the door open. The study was illuminated only by the blinking blue lights of Richard's server rack in the corner. The massive mahogany desk dominated the room. Behind it were the built-in bookshelves. Okay, find the safe, Caleb said. Eleanor moved to the section of the bookshelf that held the encyclopedias. Richard always said knowledge was the only real currency. She pulled the false spine of Volume 4. The shelf clicked and swung outward, revealing a steel wall safe. It's a biometric and keypadded combo, Eleanor hissed. Caleb, it needs a fingerprint. Damn it, Caleb swore. I can't hack a finger. Look at the keypad. Is there wear on the numbers? Eleanor shone her small flashlight. No, he cleans it. He's obsessive. Think Eleanor, Caleb urged. He's a narcissist. He doesn't use random numbers. He uses numbers that mean power to him. Eleanor closed her eyes. What matters to Richard? She tried the stock price of Vantage Systems the day it went public. 4500. Beep, beep. Error. 1 strike, Caleb warned. 3 strikes and the silent alarm trips. She tried the date he won his first major contract. 0812. Beep, beep. Error. 2 strikes. Caleb's voice was tight. Eleanor, you have 1 shot left. If you miss, you run. Eleanor stared at the keypad. She thought about the man who had destroyed her. He didn't care about the company as much as he cared about winning. What was his biggest victory? It wasn't the money. It was the day he took Lily. The day the temporary custody order was signed. The day he legally became the superior parent. She typed in the date. 105. November 5th. Click. The light turned green. I got the code, she exhaled, trembling, but I still need a fingerprint. She looked around the desk. Richard was meticulous, but he was also creature of habit. He sat in that leather chair for hours. She looked at the Scotch glass sitting on a coaster. It had a small amount of amber liquid left in the bottom. Caleb, how does the scanner work? It's optical, Caleb said. It takes a picture of the ridges. Why? I have a glass, she said. She pulled a piece of clear Scotch tape from the dispenser on the desk. With trembling hands, she pressed the tape against the smudge on the glass, praying the print was clear. She peeled it off. A faint, oily impression of a thumbprint was visible. She held the tape over the scanner light. The safe whirred. The bolts retracted. "You are a genius," Caleb whispered. Eleanor pulled the heavy door open. Inside there were stacks of cash emergency money, a passport, and a black leather-bound ledger. She grabbed the ledger and flipped it open. It wasn't just numbers. It was a handwritten log of assets and liabilities. She saw the entry, Blue Horizon, 2.5 M transfer. She saw the entry, J. Thorne, monthly stipend, 10K. And then her finger stopped on a line that made her blood freeze. Dr. Aris, consultation fee, mortgage payoff, $450,000. Maria housekeeper, bonus, $50,000. He hadn't just hidden money. He had bought witnesses. "I have it," Eleanor said, her voice shaking with rage. "I have everything." Suddenly, the sound of gravel crunching outside froze her. Headlights swept across the study ceiling. "Car!" Caleb shouted. "Get out, now!" "He's supposed to be in San Francisco." Eleanor panicked. "He's back! Move!" Eleanor shoved the ledger into her waistband and zipped her jacket. She heard the front door open downstairs. The alarm beeped once, then disarmed. "Honey, leave the bags." Richard's voice drifted up the stairs. "I need to check the server before bed." He wasn't alone. Eleanor heard the click of heels. Jessica. Eleanor looked at the window. It was a 20-foot drop to the rose bushes. She looked at the closet. She dove into the walk-in closet just as the study door opened. She huddled behind a row of Richard's winter coats, holding her breath, pressing her hand over her mouth. "I don't see why we had to come back," Jessica whined. "The hotel was nice." "I got an alert," Richard said. His voice was right outside the closet. "System handshake failed. Probably a glitch, but I don't take chances." Eleanor heard him typing at the computer. A silence stretched for an eternity. "Logs look clean," Richard muttered. "Must have been the storm." "Come to bed, Richard," Jessica purred. "In a minute," Richard said. "I want to put the gift away." Eleanor heard the whir of the safe. "Richard?" Jessica asked. "Just checking the reserves," he said. There was a pause. A long, terrifying pause. "That's odd," Richard murmured. "What?" "The glass," Richard said. "I finished this scotch before we left." Eleanor's heart stopped. She had moved the glass to get the print. Had she put it back exactly on the coaster, "You probably just forgot," Jessica yawned. "You've been stressed about the trial." "I don't forget things," Richard snapped. Footsteps moved toward the closet. Eleanor squeezed her eyes shut. If he opened the door, it was over. Not just the case, her life. He would claim self-defense. He might shoot her. The handle of the closet jiggled. "Richard!" Jessica called out from the hallway. "I'm going to the shower. Are you coming or not?" The handle stopped moving. Richard sighed. "Coming." The footsteps retreated. The lights in the study clicked off. Eleanor waited for 5 full minutes in the dark, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "Eleanor," Caleb whispered. "Talk to me." "I'm alive," she breathed. She crept out of the closet, past the desk and to the window. She unlocked the latch, slid it up, and climbed out onto the wet roof of the patio. She shimmied down the trellis thorns, tearing at her jacket, and dropped into the mud. She ran. She ran through the rain, clutching the ledger against her chest, like a shield running back to the car, back to the fight. The next morning, the courtroom felt different. The air was charged with a frantic energy. Eleanor sat at the defense table, dark circles under her eyes, but her spine was straight. Sarah Jenkins looked like she had consumed 6 espressos. She was organizing a stack of photocopies with aggressive precision. Richard looked well rested. He chatted with Marcus Sterling, occasionally glancing at Eleanor with that same pitying look. He didn't know yet. He didn't know the safe was empty. Judge Hargrave entered his black robe, billowing. "All rise. Be seated." "Ms. Jenkins," the judge said, looking at his watch. "You said you had a significant development." "Yes, Your Honor." Sarah stood up. "The defense wishes to recall Mr. Richard Vance to the stand." Sterling stood up. "Objection. Mr. Vance has already testified. This is a delay tactic." "It's not a delay, Your Honor," Sarah said, her voice steady. "It's regarding new evidence that speaks directly to the credibility of the plaintiff and the safety of the child." Judge Hargrave raised an eyebrow. "Make it count, Miss Jenkins. Recall the witness." Richard walked to the stand, looking bored. He adjusted his cufflinks. "Mr. Vance," Sarah began, holding a single sheet of paper. "You testified yesterday that your finances were fully disclosed in your affidavit. Is that correct?" "Yes," Richard said smoothly. "I have nothing to hide." "And you were also testified that you have no relationship with Dr. Aris outside of his professional treatment of your wife." "That is correct. I barely know the man." Sarah walked to the witness stand. "Mr. Vance, do you recognize this ledger?" She held up the black book. For a split second, Richard's mask slipped. His eyes widened, his jaw tightened. The color drained from his face. It was a micro-expression gone in an instant, but Eleanor saw it. The judge saw it. I've never seen that before." Richard lied, though his voice lacked its usual resonance. "Really?" Sarah flipped the page. "Because this ledger, written in handwriting that our forensic expert has already matched to yours, details a payment of $450,000 to Dr. Aris on September the 12th. The memo line says, mortgage payoff. Interestingly, property records show Dr. Aris paid off his home loan on September the 14th. A murmur rippled through the gallery. The press reporters leaned forward. "Objection," Sterling shouted, standing up. "Where did this evidence come from? This was not in discovery." "It was discovered recently," Sarah said. "This is a fabrication." Richard snapped, his composure cracking. "She forged it, or she stole it. Your Honor, she broke into my home." "This proves she's a criminal." Richard had walked right into the trap. "So you admit the ledger was in your home?" Sarah asked quickly. Richard froze. He realized his mistake. If he claimed she stole it, he admitted the ledger was real. If he said it was fake, he couldn't claim she stole it from his home. Richard stammered. "I admit nothing. This is an ambush." "Your Honor," Sterling interjected, his face red. "If this evidence was obtained through illegal entry, it is inadmissible. Fruit of the poisonous tree. You must strike it from the record and hold Mrs. Vance in contempt." Judge Hargrave looked at the ledger. Then he looked at Richard. Then he looked at Eleanor. The courtroom held its breath. This was the pivot point. In criminal court, the evidence would be thrown out immediately. But this was family court. The standard was the best interest of the child. "Mr. Sterling is correct regarding the admissibility in a criminal proceeding," Judge Hargrave said slowly. "However, this court is concerned with the welfare of a minor. If this ledger is authentic, it suggests a conspiracy to defraud this court and falsify medical testimony regarding a mother's mental health." The judge leaned back, tenting his fingers. "I will take this evidence under advisement," the judge ruled. "But I have serious concerns about its provenance. Mrs. Vance, did you break into the plaintiff's home?" Eleanor stood up. Sarah tried to stop her, but Eleanor spoke. "I went to my home." "Your Honor," Eleanor said, her voice trembling but clear. "My name is still on the deed. I went to get the truth because no one else would listen. Richard paid everyone. He paid the doctor to say I was crazy. He paid the maid to say I was negligent. He bought everyone." "She's lying," Richard shouted, standing up in the witness box. "She's paranoid. This is exactly what Dr. Aris described." "Dr. Aris, who just paid off his mortgage with your money," Eleanor shot back. "Order." Judge Hargrave banged his gavel. "Mr. Vance, sit down. Mrs. Vance, sit down." The judge looked troubled. He had a dilemma. A mother who broke the law to prove her innocence, and a father who likely committed fraud to steal a child. "I am going to recess for 1 hour," Judge Hargrave said sternly. "I want the forensic accountant who analyzed this ledger in my chambers. And Mr. Vance, do not leave this building." The hour passed in agonizing slowness. Eleanor sat in the hallway, her hands clasping Sarah's. "Did we win?" Eleanor asked. "I don't know," Sarah admitted. The judge hates illegal evidence. He might throw it out to protect the integrity of the court. If he throws it out, Richard wins. The testimony stands. "But he saw it," Eleanor said. "He knows. Judges have to ignore what they know if it's not legal." Sarah sighed. "It's the law." When the bailiff called them back, the mood was somber. Judge Hargrave's face was unreadable. "I have reviewed the ledger," Judge Hargrave began, "and I have spoken with the forensic accountant. The financial trails are compelling." Richard stared at the table, refusing to look up. "However," the judge continued, his voice hardening, "I cannot encourage vigilantism. Mrs. Vance, your actions were reckless and illegal. You compromised a crime scene, if indeed there was a crime. By entering the home and removing items, you have created a legal quagmire." Eleanor felt her heart shatter. He was going to throw it out. "Because the chain of custody for this ledger is broken," the judge said. "I cannot accept it as the primary basis for a ruling of fraud without further corroboration." Sterling let out a visible sigh of relief. Richard smirked. He had survived. The technicality had saved him. "Therefore," the judge said, "I am forced to rely on the testimony presented during the trial." Eleanor put her head in her hands. It was over. The truth didn't much matter. "However," Judge Hargrave said, his voice cutting through the despair. He took off his spectacles and cleaned them slowly. "Before I issue my final ruling on custody," he looked directly at Richard Vance. The look was intense, piercing, and stripped of all judicial detachment. "Mr. Vance, I have one final question for you." The courtroom was silent. The silence wasn't empty. It was heavy, suffocating, like the air before a lightning strike. Richard Vance sat back in the witness chair, his confidence slowly returning. The judge had just said the ledger was inadmissible. Richard had won. He crossed his legs, smoothing the crease of his trousers, preparing to walk out with his daughter and his millions. Judge Hargrave didn't look at the ledger anymore. He picked up a remote control and pointed it at the large monitor where the video of the park incident, Exhibit G, was paused. "Mr. Vance," Judge Hargrave said, his voice deceptively soft. "Throughout this trial, you have presented yourself as a man of precision, a tech genius, a man who relies on data. I am, Your Honor," Richard said, a hint of arrogance creeping back into his tone. Good. The judge nodded. Because data tells a story often better than people do, I want you to look at the monitor. This is the video you took of your wife losing your daughter. Richard looked at the screen, bored. Yes. As I said, I started recording when I realized Eleanor was neglecting Lily. And you testified that you arrived at the park because you received a GPS alert from Lily's watch that she had wandered out of the safe zone. Is that correct? Yes, Richard said firmly. I got the alert. I drove there. I saw Eleanor on her phone and I started recording. I have one final question, Judge Hargrave said, leaning forward, his eyes locking onto Richard's. The judge pressed a button on the remote. The video metadata appeared on the screen in bright green text. Mr. Vance, the timestamp on this video file says you began recording at 2:14 p.m. But the log from the GPS security company, which you submitted as evidence, shows the zone breach alert wasn't sent until 2:16 p.m. My question is, why were you filming a lost child 2 minutes before the system even told you she was lost? The color drained from Richard's face so fast it looked like he had been slapped. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by the raw, animalistic panic of a trapped rat. There must be a lag, Richard stammered, sweat instantly beading on his forehead. The server latency. There is no lag in GPS timestamps, Mr. Vance. The judge boomed his voice, echoing off the mahogany walls. You were recording because you knew exactly when she would run. You knew because you told her to run. You staged the disappearance. You staged the neglect. And if you are willing to terrorize your own daughter to win a court case, I can only imagine what you are willing to do to your wife. Objection, Sterling yelled, but he sounded defeated. Overruled. Judge Hargrave slammed his gavel down, the sound like a gunshot. Sit down, Mr. Sterling, unless you want to be joined as a co-conspirator in perjury. Richard looked around the room wild-eyed. He looked at Jessica Thorne, who was slowly backing away toward the exit. He looked at Eleanor. Eleanor wasn't looking at the floor anymore. She was looking right at him. She wasn't smiling. She was just watching him burn. The court finds the plaintiff Richard Vance not credible. Judge Hargrave announced, his voice ringing with finality. The video evidence proves premeditated fraud. Furthermore, based on this revelation, I am now inclined to view the inadmissible ledger not as evidence of the defense's theft, but as probable cause for a criminal investigation. No, Richard shouted, standing up. You can't do this. I am Vantage Systems. I built this city. Bailiff, the judge ordered, pointing a finger at Richard. Take Mr. Vance into custody. I am holding him in contempt of court, pending charges of perjury fraud and child endangerment. 2 officers moved in. Richard Vance, the untouchable billionaire, was handcuffed in his Italian suit. As they dragged him past the defense table, he lunged toward Eleanor, spitting venom. You're nothing without me, Eleanor. You're nothing. Eleanor stood up. She walked to the railing as they hauled him away. I'm the woman who beat you, she whispered. The fallout was swift and brutal. With Richard in custody, Caleb the hacker anonymously leaked the Blue Horizon documents to the IRS. The fruit of the poisonous tree didn't matter to the feds. They froze Richard's assets within 24 hours. Jessica Thorne turned state's witness in exchange for immunity revealing everything about the payoffs to Dr. Aris and the housekeeper. Dr. Aris lost his medical license and faced 5 years in prison for falsifying medical records. Eleanor didn't want the mansion. She sold the estate in Medina and used the settlement money to buy a farmhouse on the coast far away from smart homes and surveillance cameras. 6 months later, Eleanor sat on her back porch, watching Lily chase a new puppy through the tall grass. Lily was laughing a real belly-shaking laugh that Eleanor hadn't heard in years. Sarah Jenkins drove up the gravel driveway. She stepped out of her car, waving a piece of paper. "Final decree," Sarah shouted, smiling. "Sole custody, full control of the trust. He's gone, Elle. He's really gone." Eleanor took a sip of her tea. The air smelled of salt and pine, not fear. She looked at the paper, then she looked at her daughter. "He thought he could delete me," Eleanor said softly. "He forgot that I was the one who wrote the story." She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was free. That moment when Judge Hargrave pointed out the timestamp difference wasn't just a plot twist. It was the moment an entire web of lies finally collapsed. It serves as a terrifying reminder that no matter how much money, power, or technology a man like Richard Vance possesses, the truth often hides in the smallest details they overlook. Eleanor's journey from a woman manipulated into doubting her own sanity to a mother willing to risk prison for her daughter is a powerful testament to resilience. We often see perfect lives curated on social media, but this story pulls back the curtain on how dangerous coercive control can be behind closed doors. It reminds us to trust our instincts when something feels wrong, even if the world tries to tell us we are the problem. If Eleanor's bravery inspired you, or if that final courtroom takedown gave you chills, please hit that like button. Right now, it really helps the YouTube algorithm share these stories with more people. If you want more narratives about justice, karma, and overcoming the odds, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. I have a question for you to answer in the comments. Do you think the judge would have let Richard go if he hadn't messed up the video timestamp, or does the truth always find a way out? I'd love to read your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.